Hi, and welcome back to Clinker Chat. This is SmartCrete series where we go around and talk to interesting people in our network about what they're doing towards sustainability. Today we're talking to Craig Heidrich, the CEO of the Ash Development Association for Australia, the Australian Pozzolan Association, and the Australian Slag Association, about the great work that he and his industry partners are doing towards sustainability. Today we're meeting with Craig in Wollongong, which is the Aboriginal land of the Dharawal people. SmartCrete is very pleased to recognise the Indigenous owners of Australia, recognising elders past and present. We are really pleased to think about how our First Nations people can help us to define the sustainability future for the construction sector. Australia's commitment to net zero has really boosted the narrative and boosted the commitment across our sector to achieving sustainability targets. But there's still a lot more that needs to be done, including securing supply chain materials. In March this year, the Ash Development Association announced a New South Wales Government program investing $3.25 million towards investigating opportunities to use coal combustion products. Coal combustion products like fly ash are the solid waste material that's produced when coal is burned. These industrial byproducts actually have real beneficial impact for products like concrete because they can be used as supplementary cementitious materials which have greater sustainability performance. Use of these products can save energy, save resources, reduce emissions, and move us towards a circular economy. Let's go over and chat to Craig now.
So the fund that you're going to be working on with the New South Wales Government, what are some of the things that you're hoping to unlock with that funding?
Our goal with that funding is to explore how we can potentially harvest those materials. Now, there's an extensive narrative around ash in repositories as being of little to low value. And I think that's a narrative that we need to reinvestigate, I suppose. So part of our work is built into various stages, and the first part will be looking at those repositories, particularly within the confines of New South Wales, because this is New South Wales funding, and looking at ways in which we can characterise those materials, understand the opportunities for those resources, and what are some of the pathways for utilisation. So part of that will potentially be having some symposiums or workshops with some international guests to talk about some things they're doing around the world in terms of, we call it beneficiating the materials, where we can turn them into new value-added products. Whilst we've been instrumental in getting this funding available, it's not exclusively our remit to tap into that. We want our members to tap into that, we want other industry partners to tap into that funding. We're just setting up the initial investigation to set up, I suppose, the lens from which to look through at the opportunities, and then we'll go from there. So it's going to be a wonderful couple of years ahead.
The new reforms under the safeguard mechanism. So we've seen that there are going to be higher penalties for some of our heavy emitters in terms of the amount of ACCUs that they would need to pay for emissions. What are you seeing with your members in terms of a response to the safeguard reform?
We see it more as an advantage for us because of the low carbon opportunities with our materials.
Well, I think it also talks to this question of this being a global response and needing to take a global collaborative approach to this. So I've always found it a little bit difficult to think about the fact that a high emitting product could land in Australia and be classified as zero carbon once it lands. That feels wrong.
It's probably part of that broader issue of we live on a globe with a shared atmosphere, and just because you draw a line on the map, emissions don't necessarily cease there. So there needs to be, I agree with you, there needs to be a more international collaborative approach to it. But they are the challenges of dealing with other parts of the world, and in our international SEM associations, we're constantly engaging with them to look at collaboration across borders and establishing similar benchmarks and approach to things. Like, for example, I'm sure you've heard the word EPDs, and that's a phenomenon that's just going gangbusters across the globe. I think it represents a standardised approach to this, and it's a beginning of what you're talking about. It's qualifying a lot of that stuff. But all of that comes from PCRs, product category groups.
I can see the real value in that work because that's really going to lead to greater confidence in those products as well. If you've got clear communication protocols, clear measurement systems, and you're going to lead to a system where everyone feels really comfortable using those products.
Yeah. It does establish confidence around those things. And a lot of our folks in Australia that have developed their EPDs have used good baseline measurements for that. Again, we've still got to look to the international environment and make sure that we're all on the same page.
So, we were talking before about the fact that concrete is maybe a quite mature product and quite a simple processing system, but from what I've seen, the construction supply chain is complex. Perhaps one of the most complex sectors, certainly that I've seen, in terms of the decision-making processes, the way that various people might be involved in a certain tender or a build. I know that a lot of the work that you're doing is really around engaging those raw material suppliers, around how they might work together. But how does that trickle into a supply chain? How does that get into perhaps a tender or a procurement document for a new piece of infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a really complex question and one I struggled with in the early days. We had this material and how do we get into those supply chains? And the construction industry across the globe is an interesting sort of supply chain. And I suppose in those early days, I was more interested in educating people down the supply chain to understand the benefits of these materials. And if they then started to demand materials with greater quantities of SEMs in them, they would then be the
control the market.
That's right. Pull it through the supply chain. So that's been really the key focus for us. We've always worked with the end of the supply chain, but recognising that partners along the way have to be educated as well to the extent that we can. But it is hard to penetrate those sorts of relatively structured supply chains at times. But from a materials point of view, there's so much more that we can still do. And there's still a lot of emerging technologies and each of those new technologies will have a fitness for purpose in its application. That's probably the best way to put it. Yeah, we will continue to focus on all the challenges to get these materials into the supply chain. And the key ones are standards. Being byproducts of industry, there was also an environmental concern there for a while. They were called industrial residues, but over a continual period of time, we've demonstrated time and time again that these materials, when managed well, are fit for purpose and can be used to great effect in construction applications that benefit everyone across that supply chain. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So, real space to watch then over the next couple of years as you work with the New South Wales Government on how we might use some of those downmatch repositories.
Sure.
Yeah.
That is going to be the big challenge, and we're just in the early days of working through that with the government. So, watch this space, for sure.
Fantastic. One question I would love to ask you is, obviously our remit as a CRC is really thinking about how you get industry and research to work together.
Yep.
What do you see as the value of unlocking Australia's university network and our research capacity?
It's about bringing together folks around a common table and having a shared conversation. It's about doing together what you can't do by yourself.
Yes.
Okay? It's that, equation of 1 + 1 = 3. It's just getting some of the parts more than the inputs. But it also comes down to managing those expectations. I love the fact that CRCs have moved more from a research, blue sky focus to a more applied focus. And that's equally as incumbent upon industry to come up with a question. And that's what we do in the associations. We're more about where are the common challenges, which are what we call background IP that we need to try and solve, and where are the opportunities for our members then to take some of that information and work it up into a product or a service. But CRCs is such an important part of that. If they can bring the right partners together and sit around a common table and openly discuss how to address that. 2050 is not far away, as we all know, and what are the steps to get us there? And those are the challenges. It's not the aspirational goal, to steal a word from Don Howard. It's about what are the steps that we need to take to get there.
Well, Craig, thank you so much for all of your time today. It's been wonderful chatting to you. I've learned so much about coal combustion products. Thanks for getting a little bit technical with us as well.
No worries. Yeah, you'll have lots of people down. Great, getting technical. Yeah. All right.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks for coming down.